Hello and welcome to our first day of South by Southwest. I'm your host, Wajahat Ali, and this is the South by Southwest Studio. I'm very excited to be back in Austin this year. We have an awesome lineup of guests who are going to be stopping by, including actor and comedian Bob Odenkirk, and speaking of Kirk, the OG captain himself, William Shatner, will be here later in the week, along with international superstar Priyanka Chopra Jonas, iconic UK band New Order, and a whole lot more. We're going to be here every day for the next 8 days, talking with some of the world's most fascinating innovators, creatives, artists, musicians, and chefs. You can check out our daily schedule of interviews on our website at SXSW.com/studio. And these interviews are also streaming live during the conference on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/SXSW. And I cannot think of a better way to kick off the annual South by Southwest Studio than with our first guest and friend of the studio. You are the friend of the studio, sir.
I'm a friend of the studio.
Andrew Zimmern. Okay, let me give you a very fancy schmancy introduction. All right, this is going to make you just let the ego simmer for a second. This is simmering. All right, he's an Emmy-winning and four-time, not three-time, four-time James Beard award-winning personality, chef, writer, and the United Nations World Food Programme's Goodwill ambassador. Sir, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for dressing up. I appreciate it. You put in a lot of effort.
Here's it's 60 degrees in Austin, which for me is summertime. I'm from Minnesota.
Oh.
So I was like, it's t-shirt and shorts weather, and I kid you not, I'm walking down the street, all of 3 blocks from the hotel, and there's people in like light parkas and sweaters and all of that, and they're looking at me, and I'm like, why are people looking at me funny? They weren't looking at me with that like, oh, I think I recognize you from somewhere look, and they were shaming. They're like, that guy's in a t-shirt and shorts. I'm like, in Minnesota, 60 degrees and up.
I feel like the shirt itself would be like, I'm like, okay, he's chill, but the shorts. The fact that you went all in with the shorts, I'm like, all right,
this is shorts weather.
My wife went to medical school in Minnesota. Yes, I married up. And she told me that the winter in Minnesota, if you've experienced the winter of Minnesota, and you can survive it, then you can enjoy literally anything in life.
It's not that bad. We like to talk up the winter in Minnesota as being some sort of horrible sort of Game of Thrones, north of the wall kind of experience, only so that people kind of stay away, because the other 9 months of the year are so literally perfect. It's a little overstated.
In addition to being a Goodwill ambassador for the UN, I think you could be the poster boy for Minnesota. I think you almost convinced me. You almost convinced me.
I think one magazine called me the Pope of Minnesota at one point, which for a Jewish kid is all we aspire to our entire lives. So I was absolutely thrilled with that.
The papacy belongs to Zimmern.
Infallible vicar of God on earth.
And who eats well. First of all, we have to give a shout out to your beard. The beard game is looking really good, immaculate, trimmed.
Thank you.
Earthy and masculine at the same time. A question for foodies. How do you avoid spilling food on the beard?
Proper use of the fork. I think the fact that I've been sober for 31 years probably helps.
Congratulations,
Thank you very much. I think fork and spoon goes in there. I have been jostled, and a jostling, especially when soup or coffee or something in a mug is involved, have proven to be a big learning curve for me. Because what happens is you have to realize, don't look down. If you don't have a beard, the food goes right on the shirt.
Right.
If you have a beard, you immediately have to go to beard, because it sort of delays the drip, but it will also
you have like 3 seconds. You have the 3 seconds.
You've got to go for the beard. So that was, I'm not kidding, that was a learning curve. Last night I was having dinner, and I was having mapo tofu, and I was eating it with a spoon. It was very soupy and oily and spicy, as it should be. And I felt some go down into my beard, and I was so proud of myself, because I took my napkin and I just immediately placed it there, and then looked at the shirt, and I was like, oh, I'm all clean.
Oh, that's why you have won the James Beard Award.
Pro tip.
4 times. Not 3, 4 times.
Well, the 4th one was for drips and food disasters.
There you go. But well, that was actually probably the most useful information.
Heck of a category.
Yeah.
Heck of a category.
But you are here at South by Southwest. You come here a lot. You are a Goodwill ambassador for the UN, right? And you have this encyclopedic knowledge of food and how we deal with food and the impact of climate change on food. And what we're dealing with right now in 2023, tell us the latest data. What does it show about the effects of climate change on food supply?
Wow.
I know we went from beer to food supply.
No, I mean we're heading towards a cliff, a waterfall. Use whatever.
Something bad.
Yeah, it's going to get very bad.
Yeah.
Unless we do something. You know, we just to set the stage for people. The multiple climate crises that are going on land, terrestrially, in our oceans, atmospherically, are contributing to wild weather fluctuations all around the world.
We got snow in LA and we had no snow in Virginia.
What we used to be afraid of, what was 50 years ago, was the dreaded double drought. If you had massive droughts in two different growing areas around the world. We're experiencing those. We've experienced triple drought. We are in a situation right now that if things keep going the way we are, another 200 to 300 million people are going to be dropped into a category of living in a famine situation. So when that happens, crises and conflict come immediately after. If people don't have food, it creates not just the sick, the unhealthy, the dying, families fractured, an incredible impact on our ability to manage the flow of refugees around the world and give them humanitarian aid. I'm also a global ambassador for the International Rescue Committee, so I deal with the refugee side as well.
And we should mention there are now climate change refugees.
That is for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about that last year, in fact.
Yeah.
And so what happens is, you know, we used to think it was 2050. We had another 27 years to actually make sure that we don't rise our global temperature by 2 degrees. It looks like we're now looking, according to all the data and all the national and international conclaves and the brightest minds in the world, that we really have to correct this thing by 2030. That's 7 years.
Yeah.
And so what that means is, you know, anywhere that we can sequester carbon by growing more seaweed, anywhere we can avoid deforestation, anywhere we can use food that is already being produced. I'll give you a really, really great example of it. To feed people, we need to do it and not impact our environment. We have to eliminate, for example, anything to do with extracting precious metals from our oceans, because it stirs up the largest sequestering of carbon on planet Earth. Atmospheric snow, oceanic snow has been falling for millions of years to the bottom of the ocean, sequestering more carbon there than any place else on planet Earth. If you go in and start mining it up, it's going to throw a ton of carbon in the atmosphere. So there's one big thing that we need to do. We need to start preparing for climate crisis and how we handle refugees and invest in things like drought-resistant grains like kernza. Very, very important. We need to start investing in food systems that we already have that are working, and less on food systems that are for the future. Here's one example of that. Everybody is into plant-based foods and
not everybody, but
cellular,
many people. Yeah.
cellular foods that are new, right? And not a knock against any of the people I know. I have some fabulous friends doing incredible work with some great companies.
There's a but coming.
However, aquaculture already safely supplies tons of fish that we need to eat and feed people.
Can you explain aquaculture real quick?
Yeah, it's the growing of any form of seafood, right? Freshwater or saltwater, on land or at sea, right? It's a very, very simple proposition. We have a system that already works, right? People can go to fedbyblue.org, read a lot more about this. But rather than focusing, I'm at these conferences and I hear about hundreds of millions and in some cases $1 billion being raised for companies, that the solution for them is 30 years from now, we're going to be able to recreate anything in a petri dish and grow it at scale, safely, without using too much water or other energy, and be able to feed people at the right price. That's great, but we need solutions, as I said, for the next 7 years.
7 years, not 30.
If you can't do it in the next 7 years, let's invest in things that work right now, right?
Okay,
so those are the really important things.
So aquaculture, but talking about sustainability, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's pretty clear. I don't know if this is a controversial opinion, but the meat industry, right? It's not sustainable.
Correct.
Everyone's saying that in order to combat climate change, we need to go to a flexitarian diet. Flexitarian is about 70% vegetarian, 30% meat, right? I was telling someone this. And
how about just eat less meat?
Yeah, eat less meat.
There's so many tactile things that we can do that are really simple.
But how do you convince Americans of all people, to eat less meat?
Well, around the world, the same thing. Try doing that with South Americans, right? Now, there's so many
Or my peoples, South Asia.
There's so many people in South America for whom meat is a very important part of the diet. The difference here in America versus all other countries is that instead of meat being a small piece on the plate or something that's shared and put in the middle of the table, everyone takes a little bit along with a lot of beans and grains and vegetables in season, right? Very important.
Right.
We eat things out of season, which means it has a much larger carbon footprint, and we want meat to be the centerpiece of the plate. So that's a 12-ounce steak, that's a half chicken, that's a big fat pork chop.
Everything's bigger in Texas.
And everything is bigger in the United States.
That's right.
I mean, this is one of the big cultural crimes in our country is that we've expanded everything. We like everything to be bigger. How do you change a mindset? Sadly, our experience is what changes a mindset is something awful and scary that happens that affects people right away. I thought that the experience of the global pandemic would scare the crap out of people enough to be able to change behaviors. And we saw that it did in many cases, right? I see people still masking up, people are washing hands. I see a lot more antibacterial. I mean, just people are a little more aware.
Vaccines.
That you could get. You just need to maintain some distance, and you have to be more aware today.
But the flip side of that
is this rejection of science and this rejection of fact. So when I'm talking to people and they say, well, that's just a theory about this 2030 thing, I said, no, it's not a theory. Just look at how wobbly our food system and that food chain was during the first few months of our pandemic.
The lockdown.
Talk to any food producer, and this is not red or blue or left or right. Any food producer in America, whether it's crabs in the Chesapeake Bay, whether it's lettuce and strawberries in the Salinas Valley, whether it's meat in Tennessee, strawberries in Kansas, it does not matter. Every single one of them says we need more workers. So if you hop
Even now they're saying that.
If you
right.
hop in on a food issue, eventually you're going to bump into things like immigration reform. And so to solve this food problem by 2030, we need to activate on like 12 or 13 different levels, everything from immigration reform to convincing suppliers to start reportioning foods, let's just start there, in those little packages in the supermarket, right? Now, what do we have to do to convince a big chicken company to not pack 14-ounce breasts of chicken, 3 to a pack? I mean, I get it. There's a family. We need to feed them. But that's enough food, chicken, for 5 people,
right.
Not 3 people.
Especially around the world.
And so, well, in other places of the world, it's enough for 7 people, right? If you think of places in Asia where that could be diced up and tossed in a pan or a braise or a stew. So I would encourage people to eat less meat, eat locally, invest their wallets in aquaculture, and probably, I mean, as a global waste ambassador, I have to tell you, the best way to eat less and eat right is to take a shelf and a drawer out of your refrigerator. We supersized refrigerators, so we started buying once a week, and you see commercials all the time, come on in, it's your weekly sale. I mean, everything is about weekly shopping because everyone in this country is time poor. Go to Vietnam, people shop for food 2 or 3 times a day.
Fresh, healthy, your local grocer.
There's a place right down the street.
You know where the meat comes from.
If we shop less, we will waste less. Keep a waste journal, There are very simple tactical things that we can do to combat this change. And I think most importantly, and this is where it gets really ugly in America, we have to vote our conscience. And if you believe that climate change is real, and we know that it is
real.
It is. If you believe that well, there's some people who don't believe it, right? So I believe it's very real. If you believe that climate change is real, we have to vote for representatives at the municipal, state, and federal level who are going to help us enact through the power of laws programs that are going to allow us to decrease our reliance on fossil fuels, cut down on carbon emissions, all the sort of basic things we've been saying for 30, 40 years. Because right now, I'm a very positive person. My kid's a doom and gloomer. My kid said to me the other day, he says, but it's too late. And I said, it's never too late. I said, literally, I'm going down swinging. I'm the last guy on the deck of the Titanic. But I believe in human beings, and I believe in our power to be able to change things. And I think collectively we have to rise to the challenge and put people in the seats who are making the change happen in state houses and in Washington, D.C. to help us. Because without the power of laws, we are going to flounder until it's too late.
So I don't know about you, but I'm terrible at the violin. So I don't think you and I should be playing the violin on the deck of the Titanic just yet. There's things that we can do.
That is
We're talking about the future. Hopefully we will have a future. You got 7 years. The future of food is so important. It's so interconnected to everything. Immigration, national security, climate change,
Everything.
wages,
Economic development.
economic development, right? Sustainability.
Yep.
One of the ways that you've mentioned that we can move from meat to something more sustainable is you're a proponent, sir, of Soylent. And I want to quote you. We do research here. You have said, quote, I think foods like Soylent will be more popular than crickets because Soylent, which is a meal replacement mixture, takes care of all the nutrition that you need. We don't tolerate bigotry here at South by Southwest Studio, so I must ask you, why are you a Soylent supremacist and so against insects as a potential protein supplement?
Well, it's a fascinating thing because obviously you do your research. There's a little show that I did for 14 years called Bizarre Foods, and I would argue I probably did more to advance the cause of bug eating internationally than any other human being on planet
behalf
Earth.
of the bug eating community, they wanted to say
And I'm
thank you.
still a member of the bug eating community. The point that I was making there about Soylent, and now there's lots of other brands, so I'm not brand allegiant. I take no check from
Soylent are not people. I had to do that. I'm sorry. Carlton Heston, I had to.
I actually made that statement here about 10 years ago when my friend Rob debuted Soylent here.
Yeah.
Maybe it was longer than that. But here's the deal. If we want to decrease pressure on a fragile food system, I think there's some really common sense, easy things that every human being at home watching can do. So one of those things is to eat a few meals as from food replacement resources, right? So whether that's a can of Soylent or a cup or however you take it, mix it in your glass, to other food replacement products, science is good. Science is beneficial, right? Utilize what is available to us out there. If we take a meal twice a week out of away from our traditional food resource and towards a product like Soylent that's a meal replacement in a glass, if we do that twice a week, if we take
Just twice a week.
Just twice a week.
Okay.
Take food from the wild, let's say once a week, right? We've learned that skipping a meal is okay. Right? As long as you're snacking
Fasting,
on other
intermittent
things,
fasting is a
as long
big
as you're,
thing now.
By the way, I'm not talking about babies or immunocompromised folks or your 90-year-old grandmother, right? I'm talking about the vast majority of us. We skip a meal, right? We take a meal strictly from plants, let's say twice a week. We're now up to replacing 6 or 7, I lost count, meals out of the 21. If we could reduce the pressure on traditional food systems, right, by a third just by our own meal choices, the impact would be absolutely phenomenal.
Can you connect it for me? The impact, if we did that, suppose every person in America said, all right, I'm overwhelmed by all the challenges, but I can do that. I can control 7 meals. I can alter 7 meals a week. Suppose everyone does that tomorrow.
That's right.
Talk to me about the positive impact.
We're giving more money to farmers and keeping more food local. We are decreasing our reliance on factory foods. Let's just call it meat, although I include irresponsibly raised or irresponsibly fished seafood from an unmanaged area all in that clump. What happens is all of a sudden there's too much of it in the marketplace. What happens when too much of it in the marketplace comes down? 2 things happen. The price drops and they stop fishing or growing as many animals, right? So all of a sudden there's less pressure on those trawlers to destroy the ocean bed, right? There is less pressure on the big chicken companies to produce 1 million pounds of chicken a day, and they go down to, 800,000 pounds of chicken a day, whatever that number is. We start to decrease those numbers. That's where things get really, really interesting.
I have you.
Let's make those companies smaller. Let's make family farms restored again. Let's start
Amen.
relying on local fishermen to supply our fish and our seafood and invest in them so that those prices come down, right? I mean, this is where it plays into our pocketbooks, and I think the logic system extends to people out there who are saying, but I can't afford to buy fish, right? If those of us who can do, things start to settle for everyone. It takes about 1.5 years, 2 years. There's a couple buying cycles in there. It's completely doable.
You've left me with optimism and hope and something that everyone can do. I unfortunately only have you for another minute. I could talk to you for another hour. Food, the future of food. What is a food trend that you're seeing right now that you think is the most exciting?
2 things. I think fermentation and sea vegetables.
Is that what a meal is going to look like in 2040?
Well, I think in many restaurants, it's what people are paying $500 for right now. For those that are railing against 3-star Michelin chefs, you look at what's happening at the tippy top, at that apex of what chefs can do with food, and you want to see how's that going to sprinkle down and save us. Instead of throwing away the broccoli, put it into a saltwater solution and lacto ferment it, or a vinegar solution and pickle it, right? You can do preserved food both ways. All your vegetables, you don't have to throw them out. Home fermentation kits are now available for $20 on Amazon. I think that's a hugely positive trend. And on the seaweed side, it sequesters more carbon. It grows in the off-season, wintertime, and can be planted. So the whole lobster industry in Maine is flipping around and, doing seaweed in the winter and lobstering in the spring and summer. And they're finding that they're making more profit by growing seaweed. Seaweed is so good for you. It's the secret to Tom Brady being able to play in the NFL till he was 45.
Know what's up about seaweed.
It is so healthy for you, glucosamine, chondroitin, and it's so healthy for our oceans. We need to restore our oceans. So I think it does well for the planet. Those are the 2 trends that I see not only growing, but being really important for us to personally invest in.
All right, so pickled foods. So if you're Korean and South Asian, we're already on top of it.
Yep.
Seaweed, if you're Japanese, already on top of it.
That's right.
And it can be tasty. You've given me hope. Thank you for the solutions that you've given us. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for not all of a sudden playing the violin on the Titanic. We're still afloat. Thank you for wearing shorts, my friend.
It's 60 degrees
It's
out.
fine. I don't judge you. And thank you for being the first guest at our annual South by Southwest Studio.
Always
a
good to see
pleasure,
my
man.
friend.
Thank you. That's Andrew Zimmern, 4-time James Beard winning TV personality and chef and a good dude. Andrew's panel, 2 Degrees from Disaster, is happening tomorrow, March 11th at 11:30 a.m. in the Austin Downtown Marriott in Waterloo Ballroom 1 and 2. And you can watch Andrew Zimmern's latest show entitled Family Dinner on the Magnolia Network. It's also streaming on Discovery Plus. We'll be back live at 11 a.m. today with former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki. I'm Wajhat Ali, and thanks for watching.